Welcome to Reddit Aliens. Serious. Redditors who went to private religious schools. What are your horror stories? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. My best friend growing up went to one for a year. He was in public school with me till he had a health problem. His parents were scared the kids would make fun of him, so they transferred him. The next year, he showed back up at the school and told us there was nothing actually Christian about Christian school, which seemed really poignant coming from a 12-year-old. His story showed those kids were much crueler than any I ever encountered at school. Principal, who was known for grabbing students by the neck and slamming them against the wall, having attend church every Sunday or else you could get expelled from school after 3 strikes per year, not being allowed to use the bathroom during class, only 2 5-minute break periods outside of the 15-minute lunch period every day, no recess periods, not allowed to talk to classmates after the final class every day, on school grounds or on a bus, not allowed to wear shirts that have designs on them, mandatory after-school study hall if any grade was below a C. FWIW, I went to a Lutheran school from K to 8th grade. I went to a private Catholic elementary school. The sheer number of people from my school that ended up going through absolutely horrifying events in their lives is appalling. I'm no expert, but I do not believe it would be statistically possible for that many people from one school to experience that much loss and heartbreak and tragedy. We've commented on occasion that we're cursed. Sounds a little bit like a Final Destination type of thing. Be careful, guys.
No real horror stories. I was in Catholic school from kindergarten to college. Grade school was tough, not because of the teachers, but because it was the same 35 kids for 9 years. Any horror stories I had were from other kids, not faculty. My high school math teacher was expelled from the church, at school, and was defrocked from being a priest after he had same-sex relationship with a student that he claimed started on the kid's 18th birthday. He avoided jail time, but all references to him, he was president of the school for a while, had been scrubbed with effing bleach from the school. College was Catholic, but just like there was a priest or nun here and there, for all intents and purposes, it was just a secular liberal arts school. I got 2 weeks detention for bringing a kid's book on evolution to school and asking if evolution made it possible for all the animals to fit on the ark. My thinking was that back in Noah's day, there was only one species of elephant, horse, lion, etc., so there wouldn't be a problem of fitting multiple species of one family into the ark. Then after the ark evolution kicked in, and we got different species after they repopulated the world. To my mind, this was a perfectly fine way to resolve the young Earth equals evolution bad plus science at school conflict I was having. Nope. Apparently, I was thinking too much and needed to be punished for not believing what the Bible said. We had a priest who turned out to be a pedo. I know he tried to groom me at one point, but turns out I was too depressed to buy any of that shit. Only time depression was a good thing. He was convicted a year or a bit after I left for offenses against at least 3 boys and spent the rest of his life in prison. My parents love to tell a story about what a difficult student I was. The story, as they tell it, is that I once accused my math teacher of being a Nazi because I don't like math. What actually happened was that my math teacher spent an entire period fantasizing out loud about the day when God would ordain good Christians rounding up and killing all the gays. I called him a Nazi because he was standing there daydreaming about committing genocide to a class full of 16-year-olds. I don't know how much of a horror story this is, but I still think back on it sometimes. I went to Catholic school when I was a kid, and every Thursday, I'd walk with the rest of my class to a nearby church to attend a students-only mass. Unlike the rest of my friends, though, I hadn't been baptized, which meant that I was expressly forbidden from participating in the snack time portion of the service. Everyone else would stand up, shuffle between the pews, and get their little cracker, while I was forced to sit and watch, envious and hungry. Mass usually took place immediately before lunchtime, which may have been part of the issue. Anyway, one day the local priest came to my class to discuss something or other, and he brought a supply of unblessed communion wafers with him. Since they hadn't yet been subjected to the ritualistic hand-waving and prayer-reciting process, I was finally allowed to consume one. But before I had the chance, one of my classmates made an observation. "These taste different," she said. Our teacher, a former nun, nodded knowingly. Yes, they always taste different when they haven't been blessed.
This seemed peculiar to me, and it prompted me to ask a question of my own. When you bless them, I asked the priest, do all of these in the church get blessed? Yes, that's why we keep them in the tabernacle, he replied. The conversation continued after that, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was busy hatching a plan. With as much dexterity as my 9-year-old fingers could manage, I broke my wafer down the middle, sampling the smaller of the two halves and then keeping the larger piece in my desk. When the next Thursday rolled around, I brought that bit I'd saved along with me, waited for the blessing to occur, then ate the rest of it. It tasted the same to me. TLDR. I once stole a blessing in an effort to taste test Jesus. And this taste test was immediately followed by that teacher Googling the "listen here, you little shit" meme. Went to Catholic high school from 1st to 8th grade. I could probably go on forever, but I'll give you some highlights. 3rd grade. Teacher tied a kid to his chair and taped his mouth shut because he wouldn't sit down and shut up. 8th grade. The boys and girls had separate gym classes, so while one is in the gym, the other was in math. We girls walked into math class one day to see a kid on the floor in the corner of the room literally caged in by school desks. Don't know what he did, but when he tried to straighten out one of his legs and one of the desks tipped over, the nun, she was built like a linebacker, dragged him out of his prison and literally threw him out the door and across the hall. Years after I was out of school, my mom called to tell me my 7th grade teacher had been arrested for molesting kids. I said, it was boys, wasn't it? And she was floored. We girls all knew he was weird and he used to say some really inappropriate shit to the boys, so no surprise there. Worst 8 years of my life. Grew up Catholic, went to private school for 2 years, some fun things that happened. Bullies galore. Some kids are sent there as rehab thinking that their children will learn. Turns out, a kid I knew was involved in drugs from an early age and dealt them, and all throughout high school. Class got yelled at for not sounding enthusiastic enough when we prayed. No one gave a shit because we cared about actual schoolwork mostly. Still got punishment, but nothing changes. Detentions and in-school suspension, ISSs galore for incomplete homework or general mischievousness. Racist teachers who had no credentials being allowed to work there. My parents were told that me learning or even speaking Spanish would cause me to be held back mentally by an equally mental teacher. My mom brought my dad and both asked the teacher to explain herself to the principal, whose eyes were apparently wide as dinner plates when she found out. Principal apparently didn't fire her that day, but later she did to unrelated reasons. Same teacher put me across the same table as the piece of shit who was my worst bully in the school. Not sure if it was revenge for what parents did, but it's likely knowing her. I was good at school, but at the same teacher's class, I would struggle to keep up. I almost got held back a year because I nearly failed that class. Parents transferred me to a different school because this was the last straw. I wound up excelling at this school and got a really high GPA, the highest I had ever gotten at the time. There were a few positive experiences I had with one student, the most memorable being that I made my entire class laugh for a solid 15 minutes for an oral book report that I did, including my crush. Best feeling ever. When I was in 1st grade, I went to Catholic school. Honestly, it was so long ago, I remember little. Here we go. Uniforms. Girls had to wear skirts, dresses, knee-highs. Boys wore slacks and collared shirts. It gets cold, and I asked my mom to buy me a pair of the boys' pants. She did. The teasing was awful. Every day it was something. They started calling me a boy equivalent to my name, pushed me off the playground equipment, and would peek through the stall gaps while I was in the bathroom and say, "See, you are a girl." Or, if they didn't do that, there would definitely be an "ew, no boys in the girls' room." Another thing, I was a good kid and student. I never disobeyed, and I always did my work on time. I was that kid. We had mass in the gym every Friday. One of those Fridays, I sat with my friends and we got bored as 6-7-year-old children being forced to go to mass do. We made things interesting and played TV show. This compromised us making cameras with our hands like a viewfinder square shape and filming everything we saw. We got hauled out of mass and to the office for shooting guns at the crucifix. I cried hysterically when they didn't believe me. Then my mom showed up. I think they believed her as I was sent back to class. I think the teacher must have told everybody about it because my whole class was like, "Galactic Inc., why did you shoot at Jesus?" I was homeschooled after that until college. I now go to a public community college, and I'm generally happy there. As a 5-year-old when this happened, our school had a very strict code of conduct when it came to announcements and speeches over the loudspeaker. For some reason, we had afternoon announcements followed with prayer. When the announcements were being said, we all had to stand up regardless of what we're doing, listen, and put our hands together to pray. Being 5, we followed the rule to the T, and we were scared of the consequences if we didn't. In our classroom, we had our own bathroom, and everyone took turns using it whenever they wanted, except when the announcements were going. It'd be my luck that I had to go really badly when the announcements were on and my bladder is full to bursting. Sister Asshole sees me shuffling to the bathroom and wiggling around doing the pee-pee dance and yells for me to be still and wait. Prayer comes around and I can't wait anymore. I'm relieving myself on the classroom floor, praising God with more enthusiasm than all of my peers. Our Father who art in heaven, give us this day our daily bread. Sorry, it's not much of a horror story, but that was my last year in Catholic school. My brother has worse stories of going to De La Salle and the happenings of that school. I went to a private Lutheran school, K-8. Pretty horrible experience. I was fortunate enough that my family could scrounge up tuition money for me to attend, and I did get a great education, but being the poor kid and overweight really put me at the center of a lot of bullying. I didn't have any friends and would get bullied over the stupidest thing every day. No violence, but classmates and even some teachers would just be really cruel about things. From having discount school supplies to used or worn clothes, we would have to go to church every day and memorize Bible verses, and when I said I thought it was dumb we had to memorize stuff to a classmate one time, I got detention for a week. Got ostracized for an entire semester once for having dollar store tissues when we had to donate school supplies for the classrooms. It made me chronically depressed as early as 3rd grade. I went to the public high school after and was so glad. Made friends, did well in classes, and overall my life was much easier and happier. The education I got was phenomenal, but I won't ever be putting my future kids in private school. I have plenty, but the thing that really gets to me is the physical abuse. One of my teachers physically assaulted me and ended up pinning me to the ground, and he only got a slap on the wrist. Ended up becoming principal after I'd left. Oh, and when my dad gave me a black eye and a concussion, all my teacher said was I must have deserved it. Cherry on top of the shit sundae is that lately my dad's been casually mentioning how he thinks it's okay for teachers to assault kids and how he should have hit me more often. I think he does it because he knows how much it gets to me, but he's been spending a lot of time with people associated with that institution, and I think they're encouraging that type of thinking. Oh, and the local paper just did a profile on how much they helped the community. Made me want to vomit. I went to a state-funded nominally Church of England school in the day, but for 2 hours every weekday afternoon I was sent to a madrasa, which is customary among Muslim families. We sat and read the Quran and did nothing else. The teacher liked groping women on buses, but he kept that part of himself away from the madrasa. He subjected us to a lot though. He had a bit of wood from a chair that he used to hit us with if we pronounced anything wrong. Sometimes he used a bit of hose. He'd hit us on the backs of our hands and the soles of our feet. He'd make us stand like a chair against the wall for ages and give us the chicken punishment, where we'd have to hold our ears with our arms passed around our legs. Sometimes, when someone was in that position, he'd beat them across the back with timber. I went to a private Christian school from 1st to 8th grade. It's not much of a horror story, but I remember being shown a video where a man giving a presentation tried to argue the age of the earth as only being 10,000 years old. It was an attempt at joining creationism in the book of Genesis to an actual time span in a scientific context. Obviously, once you learn about the speed of light and what can be seen in the observable universe, you realize how fast that argument falls apart. I completely support science and the advancement of technology and learning, but there is something to be said about having faith in something, anything. I went to a Catholic school. I am from a Protestant background, so a lot of things in school confuse me, e.g., why pray to saints? Aren't they just humans and they can't hear us? Why do we have to learn prayers by heart? Prayer is how we talk to God, so it doesn't need to be scripted. I asked these questions, and the only answer I ever got was, that's just how we do things here. I was unconvinced and left catechisms class when I was 7. Fast forward a couple of years and it's time for my sister to get into school. They denied her admission and refused to tell us why. My maternal uncle is a Catholic priest, so we got him to ask the bishop to find out why they didn't let her get an admission. It was because Ramasu hated on the Catholic faith and opposed it when she was 7. I didn't. I just respectfully requested to not follow those traditions for myself and never stopped anyone else from doing it their way. Never hated on anyone, never opposed people in that way. I was also a generally very good student, and all my teachers liked me. I'm still sour about this. So essentially, we do not want critical thinkers in school. That my school experience was very different from kids that went to public school. Up until 8th grade, I actually didn't have many issues there. I wasn't a great student because I don't learn the way they taught, and there was no help or understanding for that kind of thing. I had one principal for 1 year that understood me very well, and he would give me verbal tests that I'd do fine with. He unfortunately passed away the next year. I grew up with most of the people in the school, so teasing wasn't really a thing. There were only 10 to 18 people in my class each year. Things got weird in high school because they got stricter about male-female interactions. Girls couldn't sit next to boys on the floor. Dating was strongly discouraged. Our school dances generally didn't have any slow songs because they didn't want to encourage boys and girls getting that close. My junior year, we spent every weekly chapel listening to our principal read a book about courting for marriage. I kissed dating goodbye. The author has actually publicly spoken against his own book now. We never had sex ed because the only option was abstinence. I know a kid that was asked to leave because he was openly gay. I know a girl that was asked to leave because they found out she drank on weekends. They didn't expel kids, just requested they leave. I know another kid that was suspended for 6 weeks when they found out he was sexually active, which would effectively make him fail that year due to so much missed time. After his parents went to the headmaster for guidance on the situation. After I left, I know other kids were asked to leave due to becoming pregnant, and the guys that got them pregnant were also asked to leave. The whole abstinence thing clearly took. Since I wasn't a good student, I literally did not matter to the teachers or principal. My best friend had a lot of mental health problems, so I was put in charge of her because no one wanted to or knew how to deal with it. However, the principal basically tried to blackmail my best friend and said for her to go to our formal, our version of prom, with her boyfriend, she needed to make me get my grades up. My parents even had meetings with the principal to specifically request that if I fell behind in my classes, that they be contacted to intervene. They called my parents in May and told them I would be failing my entire year. Dropping out and getting my GED was the easiest and best decision I've ever made for myself. I started college before the rest of my peers and have a bachelor's degree now. My friends from the school are either atheists or special holiday churchgoers now. I'd recommend the grade school for a solid education, but junior high through high school, I'd say run as far away as you can. It was a terrible school, but I have lifelong friends. We're in our 30s now. From there, with a pretty unique bond.